Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Chats with Chaudhrey. I hope you're safe and well. And look, I have a fellow Orange fan in front of me today, so I'm delighted to join my good friend Tim Germann, who is the CCO at Carterra. And the reason Tim and I are having a chat is because actually Carterra are one of those companies who are working across life science, biopharma, and pharma, and they produce instruments across all those segments. So they are affected by trends across all those segments. And so, what better person to talk to about what have been some of the trends over the last 12 months which have been impacting those various sectors and what could be some of the trends going forward than Tim? So, Tim, first of all, it's lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I just want to make sure everybody understood that you weren't the only one that had orange, but also wanted to be one with you today. And so therefore we have the
Yeah,
orange Proterra shirt.
yeah.
So
Well, you look much better in orange than I do, I have to say, Tim. So there you go.
no
Now,
problem.
first question I'm going to ask you though, because people may not be familiar with Carterra as a company, or yourself as and your background. So maybe it'd be useful for viewers just to get a quick overview of your own background and your role at Carterra and who Carterra and what you do.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. So I've spent about 30 plus years now. I don't want to give the exact number, that's not very encouraging, but a lot of years in the life science tools space. So I've worked for the companies that make amazing things that scientists use to make amazing discoveries. And so I've been very fortunate to be with some really innovative and groundbreaking technologies. So Affymetrics in the early days, molecular devices in the early days. And so Cortera presented a very similar opportunity to change the way drug discoveries are made. And so I joined almost 8 years ago in the capacity of a consultant. I had developed a consulting practice around commercializing technology, took on Carterra as a client, and joined about 6 months later full time. I really felt like there was an opportunity here to transform how we do a lot of what we do in early discovery, and the platform was going to be able to do that. And so felt very fortunate to be here and be a part of that transformation over the last 7 or 8 years.
Brilliant. And I mean, actually, I think I must have met you there when you first started at the company way
I
back
think
in
that's right.
Amsterdam, about 8 years ago, in fact. Um, and I've seen the company grown myself over the years, obviously meeting at various shows and seeing the new instrumentation that you're launching at various events, and the portfolio has grown. So maybe you could tell viewers a little bit about how what the company actually does in terms of technology you've got and how you've managed to expand that over the years.
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. We one thing we love to do at Cortera is, of course, talk about Cortera. And I hope every company feels that way. But our founder was a graduate student at the University of Utah 20 plus years ago. And he had a background in engineering and microfluidics, but had one of the founding scientists in the field of surface plasmon resonance, SPR, come to the engineering department. He was also at the University of Utah, David Miska. And he said, look, I've been working with a company called Biocor, now Cytiva, within the Danaher portfolio. And he said, I'm working with them. They have an amazing technology. We want to keep it going and expand it. But we're also looking for opportunities to make SPR as a detection methodology go faster. And that spawned the ideas in our founder to create a platform where you could take this really groundbreaking at the time detection methodology of looking at two molecules coming together, binding, separating, and determining whether or not one of those molecules could act as a good drug or impede, a bad guy within the body. So whether that's an antibody or a small molecule, looking at that binding interaction has been done for a long time and will always be done. But to be able to do that at a scale which allowed drug companies to go faster is really the challenge that our founder, Josh Ekman, took on. And about 10 years into that exercise of raising grant money and some angel investment, Pfizer got wind of the technology. They came to Salt Lake City, where we're based, and they wrote Josh a pretty large check to continue his work and encouraged him to make this interaction analysis platform commercial, because they felt at the time, this was in 2014, they felt like that would change their ability to bring drugs to the market at a very different pace. And so once that happened, the venture community sat up and took notice. And our lead investor, Telegraph Hill out of San Francisco, made a very good and strategic investment a year or two later. And since then, it's been nothing but wildfire, really, for us. And that's about the time you and I met when I joined there at the beginning of commercialization to help bring this to market and expand. And so we can watch these molecules come together, watch them separate, help determine which molecules, both large molecules and small molecules, would be good drugs. The customers have pushed us into a myriad of new applications, obviously of things like molecular glues, the use of AI in drug discovery. Our platform was made for AI without knowing about AI, 10 years ago. And so we just feel really fortunate. And that's sort of how things have expanded. As the applications have grown, the installed base for Carterra is grown substantially. So we have a very large installed uh, base of customers here in North America. We have an office in Munich and Manchester in Europe, and so we have direct operations in Europe as well. And then Revity, who's a large, obviously instrument provider in our business, made an investment when they were PerkinElmer back in 2020, and then a year later they actually took on our distributorship in all of Asia Pacific. So Revity as an investor, also a distributor throughout all of Asia Pacific. So that's really the story of kind of how we started, but also how it's spread very quickly across the research communities, really on 4 continents now. We're very
That-
fortunate.
That's amazing. But the portfolio has expanded, hasn't it, gradually? I mean, particularly over the last 24 months. It's sort of accelerated in terms of the instruments that you're getting out there and the applications that it's helping. So maybe you could talk a bit more from your perspective, looking at maybe using the trends that you were seeing in the marketplace
Yeah.
as to how you decided what segments to try target and develop that technology for and went about getting those products out there.
No, that's a great question as well. We don't operate in a vacuum, right? There's a lot of forces at play, scientific forces, global financial market forces, and so we are subject to all of that. But I think it's important to realize too that we were very deliberate in launching back in late 2017, early 2018, our first platform called the LSA. We went 5 years honing that platform, its ability to generate data in a very reliable way. We took a lot of input from customers. Hardware, most of the times you get that pretty close. Software customers always have feedback. They always want to tell you either what's not in there, what's not working well. And fortunately, we listened. And so as we got to about that 5 year mark and the installed base was fairly large for a company of our size, we started now to launch new products. And so every year for the last 3 years, we're bringing to market a new product. And the reason for that is kind of what I said before, which is customers are pushing us into new application spaces. So I will tell you that having an instrument now that is able to detect molecules that are both large in the antibody space, but also small in the small molecule space, has expanded, of course, the opportunity for Carterra. We're in those different markets for both large proteins and small molecules, therapeutic development. AI, I mentioned a minute ago, is also really important for our growth. So the customers who are doing AI or using AI in early drug discovery need to train algorithms to design those drugs using biological data. So a lot of those companies started with really good and smart IT people, but eventually learn that you must include real biological data to train the algorithms to better design those drugs. So those companies need massive amounts of data. So they don't buy one Carterra machine, they buy several Carterra machines and look at thousands of antibodies a week. I use Absci, a company in Oregon or Vancouver, Washington, just in the Northwest, that uses a host of our machines to generate lots of information on thousands of antibodies a week. We're very, very encouraged by their progress and others. So AI has been a big driver for us, the breadth of applications across both large and small molecules. So it's a number of those things like that that's allowed us to expand and really brought us into a new sort of scope and scale as a business.
Well, let's talk a bit more about those different segments then, because as you mentioned, you're working with large molecules, you're also working with small molecules, you're working with antibodies and so on. So, from your perspective, there's been a lot of changes in all those segments over the last 12 months. Some positive, some not so positive. So now, how different is it working across those different markets? Because they are different markets in many respects. You know, you
They
go
are.
to, they're different customers, different needs, different types of scientists that you need to talk to. So, what trends have you seen, for example, if we let's talk about small molecule first of all, maybe, and what have you seen in that space in some of the trends, both from a research point of view and an industry point of view?
You know, timing is everything. And when we started commercializing the platform 2017, 2018, there was a very uh, tangible push towards biologics and growing biologics groups. And we have ridden that wave over the last 6 or 7 years. But I do feel like in the last couple of years, we've seen a trend towards investment in early discovery back in the small molecule space. And so while we didn't purposefully not have, a device for small molecules 6, 7 years ago, the timing for us was good, addressing the large molecule market early and now being able to address the small molecule market. So I have seen more investment in that regard in small molecule, but it's not necessarily a pendulum swinging back and forth in either direction. I think now biologics and small molecules are basically coming on par with each other. And so we have to, as a business that claims to speed early drug discovery, we have to address both those markets. And now that we have devices that do, we're very fortunate.
And what do you think about the drug discovery space? Because again, and particularly if you look at advanced therapies as well, a lot of people moved in. If you look at CDMOs as a good example, they invested a lot over the last 18 months or so to seeing that as a potential revenue growth area for them. And you can see that by the shows actually that they all had big presences, for example, at SGCT last year. This year, that presence was a lot smaller because they suddenly realized that companies were looking for specialized CDMOs necessarily, not the big we can do it all CDMOs.
Exactly.
And they've now retracted from that. And now organoids actually are now suddenly a hot topic, and iPSCs are a hot topic, and everyone wants to move into that space instead because the FDA has said, well, animal testing is not very good. We want to phase it out, so everybody's moving there. But from your experiences, have you seen the trends in drug discovery, and what do you think are some of the challenges, if you like, for companies in that space?
You know, um, what we've seen, of course, is, and it's very unfortunate over the last 2 or 3 years, Amgen called it a while ago, the biotech winter. We've seen a shifting of where the dollars are going. So the venture funded biotech companies, therapeutic developers, we had a lot of instrument sales in that sector of the market in the early days. Because as you remember, in the run up back 3 or 4 years ago, the valuations on those companies were high. If they tried to go public, their valuations were really high. So there's a lot of money flowing into that space. What's happened is a lot of those companies who've spent a lot of money now doing that are taking whatever dollars that are left and whatever molecules are discovered already and taking the rest of that money and really um, decreasing what they're spending on early discovery and moving that money into the clinical development and validation side. And so in the small biotechs, that's really where the emphasis is. If you got to the point where you had a couple of molecules, you're now going to focus on that. That's where the money's got to go. What we do find though is in pharma, the early discovery is that money is still being spent. We continue to see a lot of uptake within our pharma customers, both on additional instruments, but also pharma that maybe we hadn't really been able to penetrate in previous years. They're also now buying. So we've seen the dollar shift away from early discovery in some of the smaller companies. And that's true in the CROs. So, pharma are not outsourcing early discovery as much and maybe
Yeah.
just focusing on some of that clinical development. That said, we do have a large footprint among the CROs. They're still busy, maybe not as busy as they were. But, early drug discovery is never going to go to zero because we have to put new drugs on the market. We got to discover new stuff. Which companies are able to do more of that? That's really what we have to determine as a business. So I think, our growth and a lot of companies in our business have not grown over the last couple of years. We have. We've been very fortunate in that regard, but it's because two reasons. I think Carterra's value proposition is go faster, spend less. That's exactly what pharma wants to do right now. But we also have a really good team that has identified the opportunities where there is money. And so one sector, maybe your next question would be, well, what are the sectors within those, discovery areas where, money is flowing? And I'll tell you, AI is one of them, but molecular glues are another one. If you track this, there's websites that track these molecular glue companies. They're doing deals with pharma, multi-gazillion dollar deals all the time. So those companies are funded. We have a number of customers for our new product, the Ultra, in that space. So it's been a shift away from early discovery in the smaller companies. Pharma continues to spend, and then some of these hot areas are seeing a lot of funding, AI and molecular glues and things like that.
And let me ask you another question, because obviously, if you look at this current year, and you were at SLAS with me in
Mm-hmm.
San Diego, and we all saw the announcement of the NIH funding cuts, which were announced while we were there, which had an impact actually on all the speakers as well, because NHI speakers were supposed to be presenting this, suddenly weren't allowed to even get on a plane. They might not even have a job, actually, sadly. And there were lots of slots at SLS having to be filled at the last minute by some of the people already there. So, as someone who is a CCO and responsible, obviously, ultimately for bringing the revenue in for the company, how do you manage that situation where, out of the blue, literally overnight, what you thought was a load of funding for your customers or potential customers just disappears like that? Or maybe hasn't disappeared, because I know they're all in court cases at the moment and they may suddenly be released down the line. You don't know. But at the moment, there's loads of uncertainty. So, how do you, as a CCO, go and motivate your team and still be positive to say, well, actually, how are we going to manage this and sort of pivot, if you like, that very popular word during COVID? But how do you pivot your team then to say, well, actually, shit happens. We've got to deal with it. Let's go and do something. This is what we're going to do.
Like I said earlier, we want to be considerate of our customers and all of their different circumstances. And the circumstance that you just described is unique to those who are NIH funded, particularly in the US. So National Institutes of Health, government funding, basically. In the Carterra portfolio, we have about 15% exposure in our installed base to customers who are government funded.
Right.
So it's a relatively modest minority of our business. It didn't mean that we forgot about it. So I'll give you an example. You said, what are you doing about it? So what we did is we set out to identify those accounts who are reliant upon that funding. Some of them are current customers, some of them are prospects. And particularly for the current customers, the commercial team reached out to them directly, either visited them, called them, whatever, and said, hey, we're aware of your circumstances, number one. What is difficult for you right now? And in some cases, it was purchasing. They told us at one NIH facility, they would be doing more. They were actually still working, still doing more, but all of the purchasing people had been let go. So it wasn't a matter of having any money or having a project that required, say consumables for our instrument, but it was just the ability, the physical ability to place
Sure.
that order. So we talked about, ways in which we can mitigate that for them. Once we heard and we got a little bit of the feedback, I had an application scientist who had done a training at one of the NIH facilities recently. She called me on the way back to the hotel, just distraught. She said, "This is gripping. This is a very um, dire situation for these investigators, and the mood is not great. And is there anything we can do?" And so that was another motivation for us. We listened to our team, and obviously on the ground, we convened a group that then set out a plan, identified all the instruments in these NIH funded facilities, and we set out a plan to call and talk to each of them, visit them, and make sure that we understood when their service contracts expired. Were they going to need maybe a consideration given by us on payment terms for their renewals? Could we get them more consumables in an order than maybe some that they would order at a regular rate, so they didn't have to place these orders so often? We've set out a plan for all of those customers so that we could accommodate them in, like you said, what has been a very difficult time. We have heard recently things have loosened up, particularly at the NIH, where they've been given guidance to spend and how to spend. at a certain level. The fiscal year for our government starts October 1st. And so really the area of uncertainty, we've eliminated, at least in the Carterra world, the uncertainty around, you know, servicing instruments, providing consumables for our NIH customers. But one of the things they've expressed to us, to a person, is the uncertainty around the 2026 fiscal budget, which starts October 1st. Are we going to lose people? Are we going to, you know, lose then some funding for current projects? So I think they feel like they've stabilized for the remainder of this fiscal, but starting October 1st, that's really an open question.
Right, well, that's really interesting. Well, we may have to revisit that then in October and see what's happening.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, so let's look ahead though a little bit in terms of the trends you're seeing. I know you're obviously not just from a Conterra point of view, but from a purely technology point of view, you're very involved in looking at what the technologies are out there and seeing what's exciting and new. So from your perspective, what are some of the exciting things that you're seeing on the landscape, which people should be aware of from a technology point of view? And what are some of the other trends that you're seeing as well?
It's not unlike what I feel like we have done well, and that is that any technology, and by the way, I do some outside work with
I know
Carterra,
you.
so I'm advising some venture groups. I'm on the board of a company called BrightSpec in the mass spec space. So, you know, I am hearing and seeing a lot of things that are impacting not just Carterra, but other things in the industry. And I will
Sure.
tell you, anything that is allowing the drug discovery process to go faster and where these companies can spend less is going to be well received. And that's why I feel like we've done extremely well. But other companies that are enabling that same sort of paradigm are also doing well and will continue to do well. AI is an open question as it relates to how it's going to change drug discovery, make it shorter, make it longer. Andrew Bradbury from Specifica recently just announced the results from an AI challenge that was conducted in stages across many companies. Carterra's technology was used to characterize antibodies coming in through this challenge. And while AI helped the design phase and maybe some of the early stages of picking some of these antibodies by a few weeks, in the end, AI in absolute terms of identifying antibodies as good binders and potential drugs was about like doing that selection randomly.
Right.
So that's actually been an improvement from what I think people thought AI was capable of doing a few years ago in early drug discovery. But there's so much potential and so much upside. So that space is still hot and investment is going in there. But the reality of making sure that there's good and rich biological data that trains those algorithms, that's really one of the most important things. And then I think another dynamic that we've experienced, as everyone has here over the last little while, is related to the global economic climate, including the tariffs from the US government being
Yeah.
imposed here and there, on and off. And all those dynamics as they happen make it difficult for people to make decisions. That's really the hardest thing. I think in the end, it's probably going to normalize to be good for a lot of people. Maybe the US does better, maybe the Europeans do better, maybe the folks in China do better. Maybe, you know, I think it will normalize at some point. But until then, that uncertainty means people probably don't make decisions as quickly to avoid spending too much or heading down a certain strategic road before they know where it is. So it is unequivocally the uncertainty in these markets that's going to create sort of a pause in how much people are spending. I will say I've noticed the large strategics in the tools space. So companies that make instrumentation, the Danahers of the world, the Agilents, the Thermos, Biotechnies, Standard Biotools, Revity, all these guys. Over the last little while, their financial results have started to tick up, and that's a good sign. And whether that's a new market, I don't think anybody's declaring that yet. But when we have people making decisions who are hopeful and have a bright outlook, that's good for all of us as tools providers.
Can I ask you some question about that? It's interesting you mentioned Danaher, for example, which is a good example because obviously there was that news about the treatment which was given from a number of Danaher companies were involved in that CRISPR treatment for the young child, which was announced at SGCT, which is a great success story in terms of advanced therapies. Now that's obviously because Danaher can offer solutions as a complete workflow using the various businesses that they've got. And going forward, I'm sure that's their strategy. Same with Thermo and Revity and others as well. All through acquisition, they brought companies in which can fit the gaps they've got in their customer workflow, and then say we have a complete end-to-end solution. Work with us, and we will help you out with all these different things. As a company though, which is not one product company, I don't mean it like that, which you've obviously got a number of different products,
No, but we're in a space.
but you're in a
Yeah,
specific
yeah,
segment.
we're in
So,
a space.
so what's your view on that? I mean, I mean, I shouldn't really say because I mean, obviously, if the price was right, I'm sure you might be ready for acquisition. Everyone, there's always a price,
Sure.
but from a strategic point of view, what are your thoughts from a Carterra point of view in terms of how you see how you see the market going for yourselves and developing the portfolio?
Oh, that's a great question. It's something we think about all the time. I would tell you that the way we look at large companies like that is they have broad and well defined, well crafted portfolios, as you described, and they enable certain workflows. And some are better down here, some are better up here, some are better in production, some are better in early discovery. And they sort of have this chart that you could fill out as to what and where they do well and where they have gaps. And so it's companies like ours that fill the gaps in those large strategic
Sure.
companies. So there are companies today that have plenty of label-free interaction analysis technologies. Danaher is one of them. Sartorius is another. But there are others that don't. And so do you expand your current capability? Do you enter a market where you didn't have something? We have those conversations all the time internally, but we also have them with those
Sure.
various companies. Hey, what is it that you intend to do? Even if they thought they could expand or thought they could enter a new market, the strategy that they're deploying, they have boards of directors, they have scientific advisors. It may not make that a priority. So where I think I would be amazing as a technology platform in all of these companies, that is only true if it marries to their vision and what they're trying to accomplish. So our goal is to be really, really good at what we do. And then the fact, that we could enter some other kind of relationship or be acquired at some point, that will take care of itself. So if we weren't selling a lot of machines and really enabling what we call high throughput biology, making that early discovery process go faster and cost less, it wouldn't matter. So that's really what we focus on at Carter. I can tell you as a leadership team and our commercial team in particular, it's heads down and enabling customers, taking good care of them, particularly in these troubled times that we talked about. But yeah, we see a variety of approaches, and where there's a gap in early discovery and making it go faster, we obviously are a very attractive asset in that regard.
Cool, fantastic. Well, let's talk a bit more about, because you are a global company, you work with Europe and North America and other parts of the world as well. And we were talking about trends, and obviously we touched on NIH and how the impact has had in North America, and the tariffs have obviously had an impact across the whole globe in terms of what's going on at the moment. But looking at the global market for life science, how do you see that going forward? And you may have touched a bit with the tariffs already, but and how does that impact Katera going forward as well?
It will impact us because it'll as a company that is smaller on the scale, and so with limited resources, we have to pick and choose where we have a commercial footprint because it isn't simply a matter of providing instrumentation and collecting people's money. There's a whole ongoing support
Sure.
dynamic that occurs there. And if you get too far out ahead of your skis, and I've been in companies where we've done this mistakenly, we've gotten too far out ahead of ourselves beyond our ability to support and sustain. At Carterra, we've been very deliberate. North America, Europe, distribution in Asia Pacific with people who have a wide reach, and we support them. We're on the phone talking, visiting all the time. What I do see changing is where some of the money is coming from. So for instance, I was on the phone early this morning talking through some of our opportunities in Europe and the Middle East. It turns out that Saudi Arabia is investing everywhere. So there's a package of 50 grants that we're aware of in just the UK from Saudi Arabia, one of which is going to pay for at least one or more of our machines. And we see that happening in multiple places. And
Sure.
so the markets aren't, unknown to everyone in the world. We all know where the research occurs, but who's funding it and what emphasis we can place and in terms of our commercial strategy is probably going to change over time. And some of that is money from like Saudi Arabia, but that's just one example.
And do you think, though, talking about research specifically, so I was having this conversation with someone else, and I saw a survey in Biospace as well recently, how they were saying that because of what's been going on in research in the US, there are people who are now thinking through that they will actually maybe even move to other regions of the world to look for work or see there's more opportunities there. Do you think there will be a shift going forward and maybe a realignment in terms of where that research is carried out? Or do you think, I mean, the US has been the hub for research for so many years, it will still stay that position just due to the size of it?
I think it depends on the skill sets. I do believe there will be a shift. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, and you've seen them online, people have been publishing the layoff tracker, and it's just been devastating
Yeah,
for
sure.
us to watch both our customers, but also people we think might be our customers, and just legions of people leaving these organizations. It's not entirely heartless, but when it's hundreds of people at a time, you realize that these are um, probably necessary moves made by large corporate entities to ensure their long-term success. And so you have to feel good about that too. But then you have this bevy of people that are now looking for work. Now, I will say the skill set used to operate our instrumentation is specialized and valuable. And so we have people in our space that call us all the time. Do you know of a place where I could work? They find jobs in weeks. And even amidst
That's
all
good
of
to
these
know.
layoffs, we're pleased for them in that regard. But we do see some of the other early discovery stuff moving to CROs in other places. I know the CRO business in China grew very quickly a few years ago. China's fallen on hard times economically. That includes the CRO and drug discovery market, which is which has seen a real downturn there over the last couple of years. But I do believe some of that early discovery will end up elsewhere. When you talk about what's happening in North America or the US in particular as it relates to research, remember that is just mostly the NIH function. And so when you have all of the large pharma and the private industry, most of which are not funded by NIH, you don't feel totally happy, but you also realize that if you are NIH grant dependent, yes, dire, people will be moving and shifting. That will likely be smaller, particularly under the current administration, the footprint of research and the amount of money going in there. But in terms of opportunity within North America and the United States in particular, among pharma and biotech, I don't think that's going to change, and that will continue to grow. A lot of the venture money is on the sidelines right now. So I think when we come out of this, you're going to see that flowing back in, and those jobs will come back, particularly in the small venture-backed companies.
Brilliant. Now let's finish off. Let's look ahead now. From your perspective, what can we expect to see from Carterra in the future?
Ooh, yeah, you're trying to get me to divulge things, but listen, as I said before, we went the first few years, one product, one platform, getting really good at this. And now it's been a product a year for the last 3 years. Now, without putting any pressure on our R&D organization, I won't commit that that will be the case moving forward, but there's a lot on the drawing board. There are things that we've not addressed yet. There are capabilities that our customers have been asking for that will continue to transform early drug discovery so that pharma and biotech can go faster and spend less money. And we have, we still have a lot of open running room, we feel like, in this field. And so I would expect to continue to see new products from Carterra. I think you'll continue to see thought leadership. John Quinn, who's been one of the leaders in small molecule discovery for many, many years at Genentech, just stood up recently and talked about the amount of screening he had done on our new instrument being just massive. One of the folks from his group previously that's now at Carterra gave a similar talk and said he had done more screening on one experiment using our new instrument than he did in 10 years at Genentech. So it's that enablement across other application areas, and maybe other areas of flexibility that you're going to continue to see innovation from Carterra. So we're pretty excited about that.
Brilliant, Tim. Look, it's lovely talking. Now I'm going to give you one last word. So we've been talking about trends, the market, everything else. So what message would you give anybody watching this if they're a bit worried about the current situation and what's going on in the marketplace? What would be your message to them?
My message is that it will all normalize. I really feel confident that there is some turbulence. It's not unlike a plane flight. You and I are on these all the time.
Too often,
You
unfortunately.
you enter areas of turbulence and then you exit them, and it's smooth sailing for a while. You may enter areas of turbulence again, but you will have smooth sailing. And I think that we've been in this turbulent time, both in the global economic market and capital spending environment. The tariffs have, I believe, are that last really violent bump in the end before some really smooth sailing. So we continue to be disciplined in how we spend our money, but also how we enable customers. I'm sure customers are doing the same thing, but I think we're reaching a point at which there's going to be some hope, some daylight, and the market will turn. It has been this market for a few years, but I think we're going to come out of that turbulence. That's my advice. That's what we believe at Carterra.
Brilliant. Well, Tim, it's always a pleasure to see you. So, viewers, if you'd like to learn more about Carterra itself, click on the link above this video. You'll go straight to the website. But obviously, I mean, you can see Tim's a very affable young man. So, if you've got any questions for him, then just connect with him. I'm sure he'll be delighted to chat with you and share his views as well on whatever you want to talk about. So, Tim, it's always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Particularly when you're wearing orange, and not the. Although I like the lime green as well that you wear. That's another color I do have as part of my color scheme. Um,
I wanted to
so
be one. I
yeah, well,
wanted to be one with you.
oh well, yeah, well, we certainly are today. So I'm glad to see that, and hopefully I'll catch up with you at a event in a not too distant future. Most probably in the second half of the year now, but I look forward to hopefully seeing you then. So viewers, I hope you found that interesting. I certainly did. We talked about a lot of different topics there. So agree, disagree. Feel free to. I've got your own views. Feel free to put them in the comments
Absolutely.
below this. We'd love to hear from you. And Tim, it's lovely to see you, my friend. Look after yourself. And viewers, thank you for watching. Until next time, as always, stay well and stay safe. Bye bye.
Thank you.